All right, today we're jumping into a pretty wild geopolitical strategy that's laid out in our source material. It's a plan to wage war, but not with soldiers and tanks, with oil.
So this is really the central question, isn't it? It's a bold one. The whole idea is that you could completely change the game in a major conflict, not on a physical battlefield, but in the global energy market.
The source calls this an oil war, but, forget everything you think of when you hear the word war. In this scenario, the main weapon isn't a missile. It's economic leverage.
Okay, so to really get what's being proposed here, we have to understand what economic warfare is. Now, it's not a new idea, but the strategy we're looking at today applies it on a massive scale, using just one single commodity as its weapon, crude oil.
So, who's the target of this economic weapon? Well, the source material is absolutely laser-focused on what it calls the river of cash that's fueling the conflict.
Just look at this number. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into Russia's pockets every single day, mostly from selling oil and gas. And the source argues this isn't just extra cash, it's the absolute lifeblood of its government operations.
And this chart really tells the story, doesn't it? A huge slice of Russia's entire federal budget comes directly from these energy sales. So the argument from the source is pretty straightforward. If you want to hit their state where it hurts, this is the pressure point you have to go after.
And this brings us to a really crucial connection the source makes. The argument is simple. When the price of oil is sky high, adversaries like Russia and Iran are just swimming in cash. And that cash, well, it goes directly into funding their military and their goals on the world stage.
So, this is where we get to the core of the plan, what the source calls the Venezuelan gambit. It's all about a massive, sleeping giant on the world stage that could, at least in theory, be used to completely turn the energy market on its head.
100 billion barrels. Just let that number sink in for a minute. That's the estimated size of Venezuela's untapped heavy crude oil reserves. To give you some perspective, that's one of the biggest known deposits on the entire planet, an economic powerhouse just sitting there, waiting.
I mean, the contrast here is just night and day, right? On one side, you have the reality of today. Venezuela's oil industry is basically a wreck, producing just a tiny fraction of what it could. And on the other side, you have this gambit, a focused plan to bring that industry back to life and unleash all that supply on the world.
There's a quote from the source that just nails it. It's described as an act of pure economic leverage, using a strategic asset for an outsized geopolitical effect. In other words, this has nothing to do with sending in troops. It's all about using Venezuela's oil to start a massive chain reaction.
Okay, so how would this actually work? Well, the source lays out a very clear cause and effect, framing it as a decisive 1-2 punch that hits both high energy prices and the governments that benefit from them.
So the proposed chain reaction is meant to happen in 4 steps. First, an outside player, say the US, helps get Venezuela's oil industry back on its feet. Second, all that new oil floods the global market. Then, basic supply and demand kicks in, which leads to step 3, a global crash in oil prices. And the final intended blow is step 4, choking off the cash flow for oil-dependent countries like Russia and Iran.
And this table here breaks it down perfectly. For adversaries like Russia and Iran, the intended effect is a major collapse in their revenue. For consumers back in the US, it means lower prices at the pump. And for global politics, it's a huge shift in the balance of power, moving it away from producers who use energy as a weapon.
Which brings us to the end game of this whole strategy. According to the source, this isn't just about a temporary fix or a short-term political victory. No, the vision here is to fundamentally remake the entire global energy landscape.
And the source is really clear that this is framed as a fundamentally America-first strategy. The main goal is pretty direct. Use powerful economic tools to secure and push forward your own national interests in a way you can actually see and measure.
So when you put it all together, the strategic payoff, as argued in the source, hits on a bunch of different levels. It's meant to help with problems at home, like the price of gas, while at the same time hitting major foreign policy goals, weakening your adversaries, and taking back some influence over a critical global market.
And that really brings us to our final thought here. The Venezuelan gambit, as our source lays it out, is a radical idea, there's no doubt about it. But it really makes you ask a pretty critical question about what's next. In a world this interconnected, are things like oil and supply chains becoming the real battlefields of the future? Thanks for joining us.